Good morning, everybody. Today we're going to talk a little bit about a different architectural pattern, which is MVP, which is not MVC, but it's a derivation of it. So let's start from the beginning, right? It's, as I said, an architectural pattern. It's a derivation of MVC, and you can see where the derivation comes from. The only different thing is the presenter instead of controller. It's mostly used for user interfaces, so UI basically, which means it's mostly used for apps. I learned it from Android, and they use it pretty much for everything now. But in the web sense, we can use it for client-side scripting and organization of JS. It has a great separation of concerns, and we're going to see how that is done. And there are many different approaches, and it's basically implemented by ASP.NET. They use it on most of their stuff, Java in Android, and PHP Net framework had it, but I don't know if it's really good for backside of the applications. And this is some basic flow. The only difference from MVC is that view and model don't have any interaction. Everything goes through presenter. That's the key difference from MVC. But this is pretty basic model, and nobody does it just like that because it gets really complicated when you try to do it this way. So we have expanded model, and these are some of the more usual implementations. This is how everybody does it. So it brings into the game something that is called either interactors or services or microservices. The key difference between these 3 points is the scale on which they implement interaction with model. Basically, these are some proxies or wrappers around models and how you interact with them. So for interactors, we will describe specific use cases like get me set of some posts. That's the only thing that interactor will have. It will describe a specific use case in our applications. Services, they have a bunch of stuff, and everybody knows how to write a service. It's basically a big class that does everything for a specific model. And microservices, they are basically smaller services that do one or two stuff, and that's it. We introduce listeners because you'll see how they get it as call. We don't want a callback hell. We just want a nice approach to how things are going to be sent throughout the app. And all data is presented with either view model or presentation model, which are some smaller wrapper classes around our models, so that view won't get directly a model from the presenter. It will get a set of information that he needs, and he will use those to display. And for starters, we're doing this through interfaces, right? This is what we got on our previous picture, only hidden behind interfaces. But this allows that separation of concerns, right? We have a view that implements something, and we can change that view with only, we can change only its implementation, and everything will work. The same thing goes for presenter, and you'll see for interactors. So I said we're going to bring some things inside. I work with interactors, so I'm going to talk about them, but the same principle is applied for services and microservices, right? We have some interactors for some specific use cases which are hidden behind some interface. Let's say we have, as I mentioned earlier, get posts interactor, right? It fetches posts, but we don't want to know in our view how we got those posts. We can get them from browser cache, or we can get them from API, or we can just make them in our app, and it doesn't matter because our interactor will get those, and he will only present those to presenter, which will pass them to our view, right? Okay, so we have listeners which come into game, which are going to do this information transfer from interactors to presenters to view, right? and we're going to see. So some basic flow is that our presenters, they will request data from interactor, and they will send a listener to that interactor. Listener will be some base class that will have on success event and on error event. And this is something that presenter is declaring to the interactor, right? He says, okay, I want this, and on success, call this, and on error, call this. So presenter decides what's going to be done with data that is being served from interactor. Interactor is going to get that data and just put it into a callback. So listener will be the one responsible for getting the response back to the presenter, right? And eventually, presenter is giving view models to view. And we have a pretty clear flow right now. We don't have mixture of things. We have separation. So view does just view stuff. It declares a public interface, what it can do with two presenters. Presenter also declares what is public, what he can do, and every interactor has a specific use case that's going to be done. So why should we use it actually? Because the main thing is this separation of layers, right? But a quick disclaimer, it's not a silver bullet, right? It's not something that will solve every R problem. It's just pretty good for app-like building of stuff. And here's a really good talk about silver bullets and hype around every new stuff that comes around the block. And so, as I mentioned, separation of concerns is one great stuff that is dealt with here. It's easier to maintain. If you have an error in your view, you'll fix it in your view. You won't be thinking about where did I use this also. It's only in my view, and only my view is concerned with that. Same thing goes for presenters and for interactors or models eventually. So you're also hiding information. You don't want to know how something is done. You just want to use it from a specific model. You have a high degree of loose coupling because everything goes through interfaces and you don't rely directly on a class. And it's easy for testing. And when I mean it's easy for testing, it's really easy for test because we can test every single element of this flow separately. So there must be some downflows, right? For starters, there's a lot of things that we need to implement here, right? You have to write your views, you have to write your presenters, you have to write classes for interfaces for those. You have to write interactors that wrap some specific access to model. That's a lot of stuff. And right, for smaller apps, it's over-engineered. So for smaller apps, if we don't have a lot of JS or something like that, it's not recommended. Why? You'll get a bunch of code which is not really required if you only have some specific bring me pop-up for some information events. As I mentioned, you'll get a lot of code redundancy on smaller apps, and it requires an additional learning curve, right? Everybody can come and write a simple on-click listener event, and on that just do something but this requires some organizational skills, and it requires, and you need to put it in your mind how to separate things, right? You have a longer setup process, but that's for the beginning, right? Eventually, if we start doing this, it will be added to Builder. So startup is going to be a lot easier, and it seems a little complex on the first, right? So let's talk some code. Right, we are going to do a JS implementation because more and more web apps we are building more and more web apps, not websites, meaning that user is going to stay longer on a specific page and do more stuff there. And it's a lot easier to implement offline approach, right? Somebody mentioned PVA. And I think it's finally time for some structure in our JS code because now we have a lot of spaghetti code and it doesn't turn out well when it needs to be maintained. And something that I like to talk about is if we don't have JS, we have something that I'm going to call push, which means basically plain old ugly site. There's no interaction on site, and we only got several responses. So I think it's time for some real code, right? And I'm going to reuse app from last week's education. And we had a simple app that's just fetching requests, and we added an interaction for let's submit a new request, which is going to be like this, and it's just posted down there. So flow is pretty simple, right? And this is, do you see this? Okay, we're going to, it's now okay, cool. So this is some type of code that is written usually, and it has a lot of stuff here, right? We have a quick listener settings, and we have Ajax directly in our view and stuff like that. This could be a little bit improved by separating some things into some modules, but usually it ends up like this, because it's just add this stuff, just add this, just add it. So the first thing that needs to be done is, let's see what we have in our flow, right? We're doing just a submit request here. So we have show pop-up and hide pop-up. We have show loader, hide loader. We have submit, and we have clear form, right? So from some perspective, all this stuff are done in a view. Nobody needs to know how to do this stuff differently. So let's start bringing our code into action. So we need something that we'll call request form view. Yes, and it's going to be a class from views like this. It requires presenter, and it's from a specific domain, right? So we need to pass to our view a presenter, so he can fire certain events when they happen. So just say presenter to here, and we need a init method which will do all our initialization. So we also need a presenter, which will also be request form presenter, right? And this is it's here, and it's going presenters, right? And he needs our dependency injection, and we'll come back to that. So let's go to view. Let's check our main.js. So we have basically open, pop-up, hide pop-up. So let's write those stuff into our view, right? It's going to be show pop-up, and we need hide pop-up. And what these do, they're actually just going to take this here, and we're going to show and hide pop-up, right? So when I come back here, I'm going to check. I can now delete this. I can go and delete this. I can delete from here. And okay, I've removed pop-up bring. So now I'm going to just take these two, which are specific click events, and I'm going to set those into init. And these will just trigger show pop-up and hide pop-up. Right, so we're hiding some stuff behind a specific function. This is first thing that is going to be fixed, right? So next thing we have is submit form, which is actually just submit it and pass some certain events to presenter, right? So just close here. This will be submit form and pass message to presenter, right? So our presenter, he needs something that will take that call. It's going to be form submission, which will take form data, and he will just give this to the interactor. But let's stay in our view for a little longer. Let's check what view does also. So it has a loader, right? And we also need show hide loader. Show loader, and it's going to be hide loader, right? And let's just say this is block. And we have also that now. So in our form submission, we need to have a value extraction. So we're just going to do this. It's a pretty simple form for now. And we're going to call this presenter form submission. And we're going to pass him a message, which is message, right? This is data from our form, and it's going to go to the presenter. Now let's finally go to our presenter. Presenter, you're probably asking why have I provided this DI app, which is basically dependency injection, and it's in my app. If you check this, I have already implemented a dependency injection for the other part of the page, which is list getting, and I'm just going to change this to form get request form, which will return get request form presenter and get request form. It's request, not requests. And so now in my presenter, I can call this.view is di app.get request form view and pass him this because he needs that for implementation, and we'll just code this view in it. And also now we have interaction with view. We have view inside our presenter, and we can do stuff on submission of form. But we also need some interactor, right, which will basically be new, let's call it create request interactor. Okay, and this is just another class from interactors, and okay, and it needs a single method, which will be create, which will get inside our form data, and it will take a listener, right? And this interactor, he's going to do an API call, this to our interactor, right? And on success, it's getting a data function, which is getting a success from our API, right? And it's gonna call listener dot on success with data, right? And if not success, it's going to call listener dot on error from data. Okay, and we also don't need to send this. We need to send form data, and that's our interactor, right? He is going to get things from our API and just push them to the listener that was provided from presenter. So let's finally come to our presenter. He will need this dot create interactor is new interactors dot create request interactor, right? And we can now call this create interactor dot create. He will get, we'll just pass this form data, but we can usually format it a little more, and we're going to interact. We're going to create new listener. Is something that I call base decision listener, which takes basically two callbacks, which is a on success callback and in on error callback. Right. So this is going to add data to list, and this is going to show error message. So one thing I forgot to implement here is how to set error message. Since we have a simple form, I'm just going to add a method which is going to be set error message, and it gets an error, and it's going to be displayed in our message error, right? Let's just use this, and we're not going to use it like this. It's going to be error, and we're going to get that error here. So our view only knows how to put that specific error into our view. It doesn't need any other information where it came from. And for our data, since adding data to list is not this view's job, it's actually another view. It's list view, which is another view we can get from the app. It's get requests list view. This, right? And now we can just call this views list view is at request, which is going to be a request, which is basically some type of view model that we're going to implement here. And we're going to call this request, this new degordian request, which will get data dot what specifically I need. It's here. I don't know. Message and created that. Message and data dot created at. This can also be separated to some type of builder or something like that. And here we can just call view, which will be set view set error message from our data, which is message, and it's an array. So I think it's like this, but we'll check this out. And basically we have now transformed all of this. We can remove this, right? We can remove this because it's now in our interactor. We can remove adding to the view because that's job for another view, and we can altogether remove this. And only one more thing I need to do is I need to add this to my initializer form, and let's go to the main initializer, and we just need this. This is some type of formatting that I added for easier creation of this stuff. And that's it. And now if we check this, I hope that everything is going to work. Submit. Okay, let's check what's wrong.
It kind of do miracle.
Oh, I have a get request. I have typo in my presenter, which is this. If try do this and do this. Submit candidate form submission of undefined. We're inside a view. This presenter. It's not this, it's a presenter. Right. Okay. Third try. Oh yeah, and that's it. We forgot to close our pop-up in our onSuccess, but that can be easily fixed. Why? Because we have onSuccess at, and let's just go self view hide pop-up. That's it. So if we submit a new request, we're going to do this, and that's it. Right? We have done a bunch of code right now for a simple post to server and get back. But let's say we want to add another field to our form. We just need to do that on the view side. We won't have to change any of the code inside of the presenter. We won't have to change any of the code inside of our interactor, right? We're just going to change our view, and we don't have to touch any of those other classes. And let's just recap everything. I think this is better suited for apps, right? For backside of the production, it's a little hard to implement it because you don't have this callback from here to there. You don't have that interaction. When you submit a form on a PHP site, you'll get stateless. Creation of everything. You'll start from the zero in your app. We have some starting difficulties, but it's better in long term, especially for bigger apps, because it's going to get a lot easier to maintain, and it's great for testing, right? We can test every single part of this. And that's it from me. Any questions?
Why your interactor was not in dependency injection?
Yeah, I didn't want to add it right now, but we can also add it into dependency injection. It doesn't matter. The main thing that I wanted to show is how everything works here and there, and I didn't do it for the list part, so I didn't do it for this. So
I thought it was on purpose.
No, it's basically on that. We could also do it from a dependency injection, and we can do stuff like we should actually do it through dependency injection, because let's say we are using some type of cache in browsers, and we want to be certain that our browsers will have it. And let's say, for example, Internet Explorer doesn't have it, right? So we could get from our dependency injection a separate interactor for Internet Explorer, and we will still use it as a normal, right? I think that's the basic idea behind that. In this presentation, it was done on purpose because I was lazy. I didn't want to add it into my dependency injection. Any other questions? I know it's a bit complex, and you get a lot of code.
It's hard to
You just have to
focus what's happening with your mind.
So basically, I mean, when I started looking into these architectural patterns, and we all come from some type of PHP framework, right? So we're pretty much used to MVC. And MVC is great if you use it right. And everybody's used to that. But for the applications, it can be good. But the one part that I didn't really like about MVC in apps is you get the direct interaction with model. You get it in your view, and you'll just put things in there and then say, okay, save yourself, right? But I don't like that. Yeah, I really like these passive views that only know how to do their front stuff. And especially in productions where you have front team and you have backend team, you can separate their code. You can say to the front guys, okay, just do your stuff here. We'll do our own logic back here, and if you need a submission to some type of a form or some mockup or something to test, we can provide you that without any real functionality. We can stub or mock a presenter class or interactor class and just allow front guys to test it without breaking the actual app, right? and we'll have all code placed where it needs to be. And if you need to refactor something, you can just do it inside of that class. You won't have a callback hell. You won't have a lot of duplication code, that happens really often, right? You get some type of pop-up and you have functionality here, and somebody wants to add that same pop-up to some other page, right? What mostly happens is you're gonna just go copy and paste that thing there, and it's not gonna be pretty, especially for someone who comes later, and he'll have to maintain, and then he'll have to think where everything is used and how many times it's used, and did he miss something or didn't he miss something, and stuff like that. This way we just call new presenter from a interactor, right?
Are there any server-side implementations like frameworks or something like that that uses this?
Basically, JS frameworks, they go into model view model, like Angular, or they do a lot of data binding, but I haven't found any framework that specifically does this on JS side. It's a different approach, really.
Oh, and on the server side?
On server side, there's no really much advantage over MVC, because you have one flow in your side. You don't have callbacks. You don't have waiting times. You cannot. Yeah. So basically, on server side, the one thing that we can take from this application are interactors or services or microservices, and everybody mostly does that. So you can just wrap interaction with model to something and pass some static data to the view and let him use it. Any other questions? No? Okay, so let's end this recording.